Hello everyone, I'm Corinne Smith, host of Celebrity Circle, where we talk about all things celebrity related. Today we're talking about Robert Downey Jr. As I said, we're talking about Robert Downey Jr. In this episode, we'll talk about the movies he starred in, his life and struggles, and some fun facts about him. In the first section, we'll be talking about his life and struggles. Robert Downey Jr. was born in 1965 in New York, and he began acting as a young child, but his growing success in the acting world was brought down by substance abuse. Robert Downey Jr. was introduced to drugs by his father, but continued to climb as he acted in more movies. Downey was arrested multiple times for different charges, and after being arrested a second time, he was sentenced to a 3-year probation, allowing him to continue treatment instead of being put in prison. Downey then continued to start turning his life around with help from a fellow actor, Mel Gibson. I know Robert Downey Jr. definitely struggled with his problems in his life, but I think many people are also surprised and proud of his turnaround and how he's doing now. There will of course always be haters and people who judge him, but I think he made a very incredible comeback. Thanks to the lovely biography.com for helping me find this information. Once again, this is just a very, very brief summary of Robert Downey Jr. and his growth to fame, but struggles getting there. Now that we have some more backstory on this actor, let's talk about some movies he starred in. In this next section, we'll be talking about the movies Robert Downey Jr. has starred in. Robert Downey Jr. has starred in many movies, including the Iron Man movies, Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Dolittle, a lot of the Avengers movies, which are like Endgame, Age of Ultron, Infinity War, and the original Avengers. He's also starred in Air America, Due Date, The Judge, and a ton more. I had to definitely pick and choose on the movies I was going to do, so I definitely chose to take some of the more recent ones because he has been in a lot. But I think it's crazy just how many movies he starred in. Like I said, I had to pick and choose which movies when I was researching all the ones to do, but I think I picked some ones that either I knew or other people would know a lot. But thanks to biography.com for a lot of the movies on this list, and then there are a ton of other lists of the movies he starred in on the internet, so that's basically how I found a lot of those movies. I think that Robert Downey Jr. is definitely doing really well. I definitely think that my favorite movies he's in are definitely most of the Marvel movies, so like Avengers, and I like the original Iron Man a lot, just because I think he plays Iron Man really well, and basically his role in all of the Avengers movies is also Iron Man, and I think he does it really well, and those are the movies I've seen him the most in. Obviously, like Dr. Dolittle I've seen, and I thought that one was really good too, and then some of the other ones I haven't seen, but they definitely look really interesting. But now that we're done stating many of his movies that he's been in, let's move on to some interesting facts about Robert Downey Jr. Like I said, we're talking about some fun facts about Robert Downey Jr. If you didn't know, Robert Downey Jr. comes from a very kind of popular and well-known family because his father was a filmmaker and then his mother was also an actor. Robert Downey Jr. starred in his very first movie when he was 5, so that's definitely very young. It's probably the youngest that I've seen throughout the actors that I know about. And then Robert Downey Jr. and his wife own a company together. And then, if you didn't know, before Robert Downey Jr. became Iron Man and all of the Marvel things, he was also considered for Batman, but I definitely like that he's Iron Man more. I don't know. I don't really like a lot of the DC universe, and I think he plays Iron Man well. I think it would have been cool to see what he would have done with Batman, but also I think that Batman is just a completely different role, and that the way I see him, he doesn't really fit playing Batman. I mean, they're both billionaires that are also superheroes, but the characters seem like two different people. These fun facts surprised me a lot. I didn't know a lot about Robert Downey Jr. and his family, especially. Like, I knew a bit about his past and stuff like that. I didn't know basically any of these fun facts, and it was very surprising. I also don't know a lot about his family or anything, so it's kind of cool looking up different people of his family. Thanks to Cleveland.com for these fun facts that I found, and I hope that all of you guys learned a new fact about Robert Downey Jr. Thank you all for listening. In this episode, we just talked about Robert Downey Jr. and everything that he's done and movies that he's been in. Next episode, we're taking a trip to the sand dunes and a certain actor related to that. Recommend the podcast to anyone you think would like it. I hope you all enjoy. I'll see you next time. Bye.